The dollar's falling. Over the last 4 years, the US dollar has lost about 25% of its purchasing power, which means your money buys a lot less now than it did just a couple of years ago. I hope you're doing well. You're here for financial wealth and life coaching, so please stay to the end to get the benefits of the entire discussion today. And you will be better off understanding what is happening to the dollar and why so many countries are trying to convert their economies away from the dollar, and what you can do to preserve your wealth and financial success despite the world economy. Now, understanding what has happened and what you can do is the best education you can get to have peace in your financial world despite the current economic and political chaos. Now, recently, CNBC put out a video claiming that the fall of the dollar is a good thing. It was titled, "How a Weakening Dollar Can Help American Consumers." And if you read the comments on that video, I think it kind of reflects how a lot of people feel about it, which is very surprising, suspicious, and somewhat terrifying. What are they going to tell us next? That high debt will benefit the economy and that high prices and inflation help American consumers? And then eventually they will claim that living below the poverty line is good for you. Why does the dollar move up and down in the first place? Why couldn't it just stay the same? And if it is going down, like the reports are saying, who does it actually benefit? If it's a problem, how do we fix it? One solution that's been proposed recently is to put price controls and ban companies from setting their prices too high. The claim is that it's a good idea, but we have done that in the past and it never really helped. I want to help explain, and I feel that maybe the best way to understand why this happens is to think about the physics of energy. Nikola Tesla once said, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy frequency and vibration. But also a lot of different types of energy are here. For example, chemical energy. When we eat food, the body converts it to chemical or caloric energy, and over time we burn it and use it. Even when we're completely still, we're burning energy. There's also electric energy, which we store inside of batteries, and over time electric energy also dissipates because of internal resistance. There's the energy of motion, kinetic energy, which we harness this energy through somehow through nature, something like a water wheel. And then there's the thermal energy stored in heat, which over time loses energy as it gets colder. There's also the very violent nuclear energy, as well as elastic energy and solar energy. But there's also another kind of energy that most people don't think about, and it's the most important one of all, our currency. In our case, the dollar. Economic energy stored in this energy, or the currency, is an abstraction of our energy. We are converting our time and talents into dollars, and that is the energy we're speaking of today. We're also always trading these dollars, and like any other energies, the second law of thermodynamics says that due to forces like entropy, friction, resistance, and heat loss, given a long enough period of time, it also eventually disappears. And economic energy has the same problem because every time it vibrates and changes hands, it loses potency. Thanks to the forces of taxation and the printing press, we see inflation, which adds the loss in dollar value due to the massive amounts of money the Fed printed and handed out to people over the COVID years, trying to pacify and quiet the masses while dealing with the fallout from COVID mismanagement. In a speech by billionaire Michael Saylor, he talked about the concept of economic energy, and he asked this interesting question about how long an asset lasts, assuming that its longevity equals its value divided by its maintenance cost. And he goes through a couple of different examples. For example, how long would it take an asset to decay to the point where its value goes down significantly? He starts with the Argentine peso. At a rate of inflation of 98% on average, that economic energy would last about 2 years before it becomes non-beneficial. The Turkish lira for about 3 years, and the US dollar under the average monetary inflation of 7% would last about 14 years. So instead of holding economic energy in something that has a high maintenance cost, what if that energy is converted into something like an asset? Now, a hedge fund, by Michael's calculation, would be a 25-year asset. A treasury bond, if it pays an interest rate of 2%, would last about 30 years. And something like an actively managed mutual fund that charges 1% would be a 100-year asset. Now, a real estate property purchased for $400,000 today and held for 20 years with relatively low appreciation of 3% per year would have a net value of about $800,000 in 20 years. So this economic energy lasts longer the more valuable it is and the less it costs to maintain. Unfortunately, according to the US Gallup poll, more than half of the Americans are not even investing. They hold their economic energy in savings accounts, which means that the value of the dollar should be important to a lot of people. Now, why does the dollar fluctuate in value? It turns out there are four main reasons: the central bank's interest rate, the economy's performance, inflation, and geopolitics. Now, what's interesting is that while the rest of the world is lowering the interest rates to make sure their economies don't go into recession, the US is holding its interest rate pretty high. And that attracts a lot of money to come to the US Treasury bonds, which makes the US dollar stronger. Yet, one of the reasons the dollar is going down right now is because of these geopolitics in the world. The US dollar has been the world's reserve currency for decades, but almost every single month another country leaves the dollar standard to join the BRICS bloc, which includes many of the major countries, including Brazil, Russia, India, and China. And China is trying to manipulate the yen into the economic standard. Other countries, including the latest, Malaysia and Thailand, are all trying to diversify their payment systems away from dollars, which means they'll need fewer dollars over time, and that will weaken the dollar. One of the presidential candidates said just this week that the US must maintain its position with the dollar being the standard in the world economy, and to lose that standing would be catastrophic. The next generation is who benefits and who benefits from the weaker dollar. Now, let's get back to the economic energy. That the best ways to store economic energy is by investing. Now let's ask this question again: who exactly benefits from this weaker dollar? Think of it like this: every time the dollar becomes weaker, anything that's priced in dollars generally becomes more expensive because it takes more dollars to buy that same exact thing. Now, there have been many advocating the benefits of a weaker dollar, with the thought that the weak dollar would somehow benefit the US economy. And you might think this way as well, but we have been hurt very, very badly by our own Federal Reserve, which has also created a very strong dollar. And that's something nice in one sense, but it makes it much harder to do business outside of this country. The question is why? And this is where it gets really interesting, because a weaker dollar can be beneficial, especially if you're primarily an investor. In the early 2000s, for example, the dollar became much weaker against the euro, and it dropped from 85 cents a euro in 2001 to over 150 by 2008. At this time, US investors holding European stocks saw their returns amplified when converted back to dollars. Just Google the companies that derive a big portion of their profits overseas, and you'll see which ones stand to benefit. But something else that goes up in price when the dollar goes down in value are commodities. Now, during the financial crisis of '08, the dollar weakened, and gold prices went up from about $700 an ounce in 2008 to almost $1,900 an ounce by 2011. There's another commodity that has benefited from a weaker dollar: Bitcoin. When the dollar has depreciated, Bitcoin's price has almost always moved in the opposite direction, which makes sense. When it takes more dollars to buy something, that thing becomes more expensive. So if you have a little bit of money and you like to invest that money, chances are a weaker dollar could be a good thing. But if you're someone who does not want to invest that much and you're a consumer that likes to travel, then a weaker dollar could be a bad thing. Consider the effect on all of us, especially we in the United States. As imports are brought in, because we import a lot of stuff, then those things become more and more expensive, and that cost is shared with the consumers. Now, oil is a good example. Between 2002 and 2008, the US dollar fell by around 40%. And during that time, the oil went up from around $20 a barrel in 2002 to over $140 a barrel by the mid 2008. So my follow-up question to all of this is, what can we do to fix it? One of the political candidates is pushing the idea again of price controls. We've tried that in the past, and the result was really bad. It all started in 1971 with an executive order number 11615. And for 90 days, President Nixon made it illegal to raise the price of food, rent, and wages. He said, and I quote, "The time has come for decisive action that will break the vicious cycle of spiraling prices and costs. And I am today ordering a freeze on all prices and wages throughout the United States for a period of 90 days. End of quote. What happened was complete opposite of what they wanted. The price of commodities went way up, and it became known as the Nixon shock, because one of the first things that happened was a shortage of supplies. When the price is artificially kept low and suppressed, producers can sometimes find it unprofitable to sell that particular commodity, and they end up making less of it. Now, during the 1970s, for example, price controls on gasoline led to fuel shortages. Long lines at gas stations started to become pretty common, and in some cases, gas stations ran completely out of gas. And it wasn't just limited to gas. Price controls on other commodities led to shortages across the whole economy, and that created an opportunity for black market to exist, because human psychology says when something that we need to buy is scarce, we tend to hoard it. We want more and more of it, and because people knew there was a shortage of fuel, they would buy not just what they needed, but a little bit extra, just in case. And that made the shortages even worse. So people started selling their extra stuff for a little bit of profit. You could wait in line for a couple of hours for your gas, or you could buy my extra gas for a little bit of extra dollars. And that's what made everything more expensive, which contributed to inflation. But we don't even have to go back as far as the 1970s, because just recently, during COVID, it happened with toilet paper. Remember, anyone who had a little bit extra started selling it on the side for a bit of profit. So we've tried price controls in the past, and it did not help the economy. It made it worse. And as soon as this proposal was publicly announced, the dollar became weaker. So for those who are not familiar with history, it can sound like a good idea, but history does not lie. What about jobs? I had another question. What does all of this mean for people's jobs? Because there was a revision from the Labor Department just recently which revealed that the United States added 818,000 fewer jobs than previously reported over the last year. In other words, the US economy actually created almost 1 million less jobs than what was first reported. And that is the single biggest revision since the year 2009. So now that this news has come about, these weaker jobs, it also points to a slowing economy. This is also another reason why the dollar could be getting weaker. And because the economy is getting weaker, the Federal Reserve wants to make sure we don't go into a full-blown recession, which is one of the reasons why interest rates could be coming down. In fact, the market is predicting that the Federal Reserve will lower interest rates in September, and it's pricing in 4 interest rate cuts. A lower interest rate attracts less money to be parked into US Treasuries and assets, which means a weaker dollar. But economists also theorize that a weaker dollar could help with employment. But it depends on a lot of different factors. Now, if you've made it this far into this presentation, here's what I think. This year, we're in an election year, so all the numbers that I'm seeing reported by the government make me tend to think the real numbers are probably not as good as what I'm seeing. And the next week, there's another news story that comes out saying that it's even worse. So yes, the US economy is slowing down, and every 100 days that pass, we add another $1 trillion to the national debt, which means we either have to pay down the debt or lower interest rates real soon, which is what I think will happen. Now, I don't know 100% for sure if interest rates will go down soon, but it looks like there's a strong possibility. Either way, it looks like it's a really good time to be an investor holding assets. And if you're mostly a consumer that's not investing, I'm going to repeat what I said in many of my videos, which is to please make sure that you have at least 6 months of expenses built up in an emergency fund. And as for me, I'm going to continue holding my assets, investing, and holding a little bit of cash, which is exactly what people like Warren Buffett are doing right now. But I'd love to know what you think, so please comment and please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Remember that every time we share good into the world, the universe rewards us in multiple ways. Keep coming back for more insights and financial and life coaching, and I'll see you in the next presentation.